Hi everyone! So for this week's discussion, I decided to do the week 10 question, um, which says, consider the concept of muckraking. What is muckraking? Is it a legitimate concept? Could modern media be considered muckrakers? Why or why not? Give specific examples from modern media and connect your arguments back to the reading. So just to go ahead and start off, so just like a little definition and background on the muckrakers. So they just began as a form of reform press. They were a group of journalists that saw problems and wanted to bring attention to them and do everything they could in their power to change them. And because newspapers and magazines were the best form of mass communication, many muckraker journalists wrote about the conditions that needed reform. So on page 10 in our books, you will see under the progressive movement, or forerunners of muckraking, it mentions that Populist and the Farmers Alliance waged much of their battle against railroads, banks, and food processors on the page of their newspapers. So when it started off, they weren't trying to, speak poorly of people per se. It was more so like institutions and just matters in society that needed attention called to them. So I think today it has a negative connotation. Muckraking has a negative connotation because people connect it with maybe talking poorly about celebrities or talking poorly about just leaders in society. But it actually started with positive intent, in my opinion. Some historians credited Arena as the first muckraking magazine. It was very popular. And essentially, muckrakers were a group of American writers throughout the Progressive Era that provided detailed descriptions of the political and economic corruption, as well as social hardships that were sweeping the nation. Most of which was caused by big businesses, monopolies, in a rapidly industrializing United States. Just to kind of sum it all up, give a summary of who they all were and what their mission was. The public became hooked on stories of political corruption, industrial monopolies, and fraudulent business practices that were spreading throughout the public. And that's just kind of how it started turning into how we know it today, what we know of it today. And most muckraking magazines were very popular. Some of the most popular that you can find on page 243. Let me get there real fast. So those are going to be magazines like McClure's, which expose municipal corruption and corporate greed and misconduct. So you can see a little bit of that on 243 in our books, and that's in the Age of New Journalism chapter. So it's not in this chapter, but I do remember reading about it before. Like I mentioned, today it is commonly known as a form of publishing scandalous information about people in like a sneaky, underhanded way. In my opinion, when it first started, it was a legitimate concept. It was first created, and it made more sense because, as I said, that was the main form of mass communication. They didn't have social media or the internet or even like flyers and groups, like focus groups and stuff. I mean, they couldn't really get their message out about the importance of everything, and this was their best way to do it. So now we have other forms of media that can do the investigative journalism, so to speak. So it began to shy away from legitimate concerns like poverty and unsafe working conditions and turn into bad-mouthing leaders and prominent members of society and gossip. So throughout this era, it eventually turned into how we know muckraking today. And I do believe that modern media could be considered muckraking. Some examples being like any form of investigative journalism. So that could be anything from like your usual news source to internet blogs, just anything of that nature. We also obviously have examples of modern media where the publication talks poorly of celebrities. I mean, we've gone over that before. I believe I mentioned in the last video that we have gossip magazines, which, if you're going off of what you know of muckraking to be like talking poorly about people in society, celebrities, public figures, political figures, things like that, then that would be more of what you're looking for towards an example. But if the definition of muckraking is to essentially call out institutions and leaders as corrupt or bring attention to current problems, then I would even go out on a limb here and just say that, even protesting is a form of muckraking, because you are trying to bring change to a situation in society. And so essentially, if that is your definition of muckraking, then like how it first began, then I would even go as far as to say protesting would be a form of it, just a modern example. So those are my thoughts for this discussion. If you have any questions, just let me know, and thank you.